It's the third Wednesday of Advent, 2021, and we're journeying into Advent with Richard Rohr. And this is what he writes today in his book, Preparing for Christmas. First of all, he quotes Isaiah 45, 24 and 25, where the prophet says, "Only in the Lord are righteousness and strength. In the Lord, all the offspring of Israel shall triumph and glory." Rohr writes, one of the major problems in the spiritual life is our attachment to our own self-image, either positively or negatively created. We have to begin with some kind of an identity, but the trouble is that we confuse this idea of ourselves with who we actually are in God. Ideas about things are not the things in themselves. We all have to start by forming a self-image, but the problem is our attachment to it, our need to promote it and protect it, and have others like it. What a trap that becomes. Fortunately, that is what the Holy Spirit has to strip away from us so that we can find our triumph and glory, as Isaiah says, in God's image of us rather than our image of ourselves, which is always changing anyway. Who we are in God is much more enduring and solid foundation. I always say that I will take God's kind judgment of me any day over my unusually harsh judgment of myself. I will take God's image of me any day, which is always patient and merciful, over my neighbor's rashly formed image of me. God always sees his son Jesus in me and cannot but love him. And this is a solid and enduring self-image. No up and down anymore. Rohr writes, when I started ministry in the early 1970s in Cincinnati and worked with young people, it seemed like I spent most of the time trying to convince teenagers that they were good. They all seemed to be endlessly hating themselves. And later I saw it was adults too who forever doubted and feared themselves. They had to spend much of their energy trying to feel good about themselves. And their self-image was based on mere psychological information instead of theological truth. What the gospel promises is that we are objectively and inherently children of God. This is not psychological worthiness. This is ontological, metaphysical, and substantial, and it cannot be gained or lost. With this given God image comes our self-image, and we are home free. And the gospel is just about the best news that we can possibly hope for. I am convinced that so much guilt and low, negative self-image, self-hatred, and self-preoccupation occurs because we've allowed Christian people to be at home in a world and take their cues and identity from the world that Jesus told us never to take as normative to begin with. As John says, why do you look for one another for approval instead of the approval that comes from the one God? So many of us either accept a successful or negative self-image instead of a system of false images to begin with. This will never work. We must find our true hidden self with Christ in God, as Paul says, or as Teresa of Avila said, find God in yourself and find yourself in God. Then we do not go up and down, but we are built on the rock of ages. And so Rohr's question for us on this third Wednesday of Advent is, which of your self-images, whether positive or negative, get in the way of your relationship with God? Whenever we get defensive or go emotionally up and down, this is a sign that we are attached to some kind of self-image. I've been there. What about you? God bless you, everyone.